You're driving along in your Ford Taurus. This one's a 2010, and you get these two lights right here. You need to get your codes checked and see what's going on with the ABS system. Traction control light is on, and so is the ABS light. You hook up a reader, you see a C1299 left rear wheel speed sensor input signal fault. So that can be set by a couple different things. So we're going to raise the vehicle for an inspection and see what's going on. So I've raised the vehicle up in the air, and this is the left rear hub assembly on the back side. And you can see your wheel speed sensor right here, and it goes right here, and you can see how rusty it is right here. There's a little portion of the ring is missing, and that sensor reads this ring as it spins to determine the wheel speed. If there's any deviation in that at all, it can cause the ABS light to be on. So unfortunately, this means that the hub has to be replaced. So in order to do that, we got to remove these 4 bolts. But to do that correctly, we need to remove this sensor, the tire and wheel, the rotor, and the bracket and caliper up here, so we can get access to remove this out of the knuckle assembly. So I'll pull this stuff off, show you exactly what I did when we get there. Here's one I did before. You can see it's a lot cleaner. Try to get the focus there, but just real clean, nice magnetic area for it to read. Another reason that can cause that light to come on is like pieces of metal getting on that magnetic ring where the sensor reads. You just could clean that off with some pressurized air, and it would remove the inconsistencies there, and that might fix your issue. It's something you can try. Here is what a brand new one looks like. You can see like the ridges, and that's what gives the speed sensor its reading so that your ABS doesn't kick on while you're driving. Take off your wheel. It's a 19 mil for all 5 of these. Take off the Torx bit. It's a T40. You might need an impact driver for that. Take off your brake caliper. It's a 13 mil bolt right here and right here. Take off your caliper bolts right here and right here. They're 15 mil, and that's for this piece right here. Take off the rotor. All right, so now you're gonna take out this wheel speed sensor. You're gonna remove this 8mm bolt and very gently pry this out without damaging it. If you do damage it, you're gonna have to replace this whole assembly, and it goes, I don't know, it's like 3 feet long, and it connects somewhere up where the differential would be if you had all-wheel drive. So you wanna make sure to very gently take that out. All right, so the wheel speed sensor isn't coming out for me. I broke the tab, but I'm gonna try and work around it. The next step is to pull these 18 mil bolts out, these 4 that hold the hub in. All right, so this is what it should look like once you have all those bolts out. Normally you'd have the sensor out of the way. And then this is when you grab your hammer, your sledgehammer, or air hammer, and try to pry this thing out. You want it goes out that way. It goes towards the outside. And you can smack the front of it now with the hammer, and it's loose. I've left this on, but I've had to take this off before, but I'm gonna try it first. But to get this off, you'd have to cut across here and undo these 8mm bolts that hold this backing plate on. And then you bend the backing plate back to shape after you take it off to reuse it, or you can replace it. I reuse it because I don't care if it's new or not, or has a little cut right here. But this is the thin spot. You cut it here and kind of taco it and pull it over the hub assembly right there to turn the back part of it on the knuckle. But I'm gonna try and do it without removing that. All right, so once your knuckles removed, this is what you look like. And luckily I didn't damage the sensor here. So as you can see, there's a lot of crustiness, and this is what causes it to be so hard to be removed. You want to clean this out as best you can, but trying to leave this surface as untouched as possible and only getting the corrosion out of there. Some other tips for when the wheel bearing's in there is to use an air hammer. It's clearly the best way possible of all the ways I've done it. But what you can do is just pound on the back of it down and up until it starts kind of going back and forth, and this will stop it here. That's why I was gonna remove this if it didn't go, but it was going back and forth enough. And then you can get from the back side and push it in out from inside there. So once you get it going and it gets loose, you're getting close. But we're gonna hit this with some penetrating oil and clean it up as best we can. So once you clean it up, put some anti-seize on it, and then you'll notice that 2 of the bolt holes are closer together than the other 2, and that's how your new wheel bearing will be. I'm gonna make sure that you angle that correctly and put that back in there. Then put your bolts in from the backside and tighten them to spec. I don't know exactly what the spec is, but you need to get it really tight. So I put back those 4 18mm bolts. Make sure you go in an X pattern, top to bottom, then left to right or right to left, either way. But just bring them in snug, don't super tighten them, get them all 4 real close, and just sequentially go around until it pulls that bearing in nice and straight. And then you want to clean all the debris out of here. I got a little bit left up here. I'm going to take an air hose, try to clean that stuff out of there. And this is what it should look like after you got it all cleaned out. Just a nice clean surface for that sensor right here to read on this brown ring right here, so it gets a proper wheel speed signal. I haven't mentioned that at all, but the hub here, they have 4-wheel drive versions of this. This vehicle is a front-wheel drive. I think it's the shows, or you might have a fleet vehicle that's all-wheel drive. If you have that, all you have to do to get that bearing out is on the front side of this hub, there'll be an axle lug nut here, and you can pull that off. I think it's a 32mm nut, and just spray penetrating oil in here and then tap it in with the hammer so it's loose, and the hub will come out, but the shaft will stay in there. And when you go back together, you just get the shaft into the splines right here. You can see those splines, and lube those with anti-seize and put it back on. Make sure you don't cross hatch these, and then it should go back together if you have an all-wheel drive situation. All right, so once you have everything back together like you see here, it's everything in reverse order. There's a couple things you want to check before you put the wheel back on and get her on the road, so you don't have to come back and do some more work. So sometimes this backing plate can get bent, especially if you had to take it off or cut it. You want to make sure that it's nice and flat and not touching the rotor. And the way you can check is you grab the hub itself and spin to make sure you don't have any sound besides the pads touching the rotor here. Number 2, you want to make sure that if you had to take this out, that it's back in correctly and it's plugged in. And if you had to replace it, you want to make sure you get that bolt in there, and that it's orientated correctly, and that it's plugged in especially. Now, once you start driving, the light might stay on for a minute, but it should go off momentarily. Also, you want to make sure that you get these nuts. These are probably the most important bolts to get snug correctly. I don't know the spec off the top of my head. And so just so it's in here, You're supposed to replace these 4 bolts. Here's the part number right here, W714333. You need 4 to do this job, and it should be replaced. And the torque spec is 98 pound-feet in a cross pattern, like I said in the video. So make sure you have 4 new bolts and 98 pound-feet on those. If you have all-wheel drive and you got to take off that nut for the drive shaft, you need 258 pound-feet on that new nut. You have to replace the nut as well. Part number for that is a W712435. That's the hub nut for all-wheel drive if you have an axle in the rear like this one. So once you start your test drive, the light will go out. It went out so fast in such a short distance that I didn't even have my camera out already, but as you can see, the light's out. I'm in a parking lot that's fenced off, so we're safe here, but you will know if your repair is fixed by that light going out.